So I'm back from Unbound XL in Kansas, and I'm going to show you how I have my gravel bike set up for 350 miles of self-supported racing in the Flint Hills, and how that led to a clean, mechanically clean run out there on a course that's notorious for flats and punctures and all sorts of drivetrain issues from rough road and mud. So I'm pretty excited about how this setup worked out for me. I did ride there from home, which was 1,250 miles. So this is very much a setup for comfort, all day comfort, ultra endurance comfort, and efficiency. And at the end of the video, I'll share a couple things that I would change in the future when I go back to race Unbound. So this is a pivot vault frame. It's an extra small. I'm 5'2½". It is hard to find small frames that fit really well, and I'm really psyched with how this one fits me. I have it set up with Industry 9 Solix G wheels, which I am really psyched with. They're 10% faster than the older model wheel, and so it's pretty exciting to know you're going faster out there because of a super efficient hub. Tires are always a topic of discussion and stress for people at Unbound. I went with the tried and true Maxxis Ramblers. They're proven out in the Flint Hills, and I used a 50C in the front, 45C in the rear for mud clearance on this frame. If mud wasn't a concern, I'd go up to a 50 for that additional platform. And these Ramblers are Silk Shield, which are the most durable, puncture resistant, and I didn't have a single puncture or flat out there. Never had to add air. Tire pressure wise, for my body weight with the additional weight of water and food for upwards of like 8 hours, I ran about 25 psi in the rear and about 23 in the front. And I did let out a tiny bit at the start line, so it was probably a little bit lower than that. I put on my vault, I went with the Fox 32 taper cast fork. While it is heavier for a rough course like the North Course at Unbound and the long distance of 350 miles, like for me almost 27 hours of riding, that suspension was amazing. I didn't have any upper body fatigue or hand numbness, which I think says something for that amount of time on drop bars. And I was able to really charge the descent between my tire setup and that fork. I felt like I was able to really make the most out of my mountain bike skills and gain a lot of time on more technical sections. So that is definitely something I would continue to run on the North Course of Unbound. I have Pro drop bars. They're slightly wider. In the future, I would go a little bit more narrow for more of an aero position, but because I bike packed to the event and I mostly ride a mountain bike, I wanted a slightly wider, more upright upper body position. And I do think that is part of why my upper body fared so well over the distance of this race. I use Ergon bar tape. It's really comfortable and certainly adds to that additional dampening with the fork. I have Pro Aerobars on my bike for this race for the XL. I was skeptical of running Aerobars at first because they seemed unnecessary, added weight, etc. And I would never race the XL distance without Aerobars because of the ability to get into a more aero position and be a lot more efficient in that way. And then also for the ability to take your weight off your hands and give your hands a break. I spent a lot of time pedaling in these, and I think as long as you spend some time training in them, then they're an amazing and worthwhile addition to the XL setup. In the future, one way I could lighten my setup would be to run a carbon bar, but that's a pretty minor change. My drivetrain here is primarily Shimano GRX, but slightly customized for my needs. And so I have GRX brakes. I have a 160 rotor in the front, 140 in the rear. I could probably do 140 for XL, but because I was bike packing here with really big descents on a loaded bike, I went with the bigger rotor. I don't think that rotor size would change anything for my results or what I'm experiencing out in the Flint Hills. For the drivetrain itself, I run a Shimano Dura Ace road crank in 160 millimeter crank length, and that's for the hip and back pain I've had in the past. And with this crank length, my back has done the best that it has ever done since a car accident a number of years ago. And to make that crank compatible with the GRX setup, I have a wolf tooth 42 tooth chainring customized to fit on here, and then my standard XT 1051 cassette 12 speed with an XTR chain. Simply have an XT cassette on here because I bike packed to the event, so I put 1,250 miles loaded on my bike before the race, and the XT cassettes are wear out a little bit slower than XTR. If I were to show up just to race, I'd probably go with the slightly higher price point for the lighter cassette. And then, yeah, GRX derailleur and shifters, and it was amazing. I love having just one gear range to think about while out there. I love that it's really identical gearing to my mountain bike and not having to worry about a front derailleur, especially with the potential for mud out there. So it just keeps things a little more simple. As far as my other contact points go, I always run an Ergon SR Pro women's saddle on all my bikes, so I have that on here. I have a pivot carbon post. In the future, I think I would actually go with the Ergon SF Pro seat post. It adds additional dampening to the back, and I think that would be a really nice addition at no weight penalty for such a long race. And I run Shimano XTR pedals, and I wore my Shimano Spire mountain bike shoes, knowing that there could be quite a bit of hiking out there if we were to have bad mud, which fortunately we only had about a mile of hiking this year. That's about it as far as the actual build goes, but I'm going to talk about lights and bags and hydration and that strategy, because I think that's a huge part of being efficient and having a smooth ride out there. So lights, I've been running Phoenix lights for ultra racing and bike packing for as long as I've been doing this, the last decade plus. And so I ran on the front a Phoenix BC26R, and this I ran in the high mode setting the entire night. I carried 2 batteries for it and probably ended the first night with an extra 3 or 4 hours of light, which if I needed it for the second night would have been really nice to have. And then on my head, I ran the Phoenix HM65RT, which mounts just onto my helmet. I'm able to quickly slide it off so I don't have to ride during the day with the weight on my head. And this I also ran on high and carried 2 batteries for. And again, replaced with maybe 3 more hours of darkness the first night. So I was really psyched to be able to run my lights on high, have plenty of light for the whole first night, and I finished a number of hours before dark the second day, but if I had had anything happen out there, I could have needed that light. So that was part of being self-sufficient out there. For water, I ran 2 Hydropack/Polar Bottle bottles here, both about 20 ounces. And then in my hydration pack, I ran the Hydropack Contour 2 liter. And that was plenty of capacity for me to get in between the water stops out there. And I carried that in a Patagonia Slope Runner vest, in which I also was able to carry a bunch of my nutrition in the pouches here. I had my Garmin InReach back here tracking, as well as like my money and my phone, my pump, my paint stick slash brush for mud, that was all in here as well. And I should note that I do carry a pump because CO2 does run out. Other things I carried and other setup details. I had Revelate Designs mag tank right here. It clips closed really quickly and easily, so you don't have to deal with zippers. And in that, I had a little wolf tooth chain lube, which I was amazed how many people didn't have chain lube, but I used it like 4 times at least. Some plugs, my CO2 was in here, spare batteries ended up in here, and then I also had other food stuffed in here. In this wolf tooth roll top bag, I have my full repair kit, like a full flat kit. I carried 3 tubes, most I've ever carried for any race. 2 were tubalitos and 1 was a regular rubber tube. A full patch kit, like glue-on patches, tire boot, quick links, multi-tool with a chain tool, tire lever, and some duct tape, thread and needle, all those things. So amazingly, I never opened this, but I was really, I wouldn't change anything because you just can't control when mechanicals do happen. So I was ready for that. And then in this Revelate prototype bag, I had my rain jacket. That was it as far as bags go. And then for navigation, here I have my Garmin Edge 840 Solar, which is girth hitched onto my handlebars. That is one strategy I have for keeping my Garmin from leaving my bicycle. And this little device with the 350-mile track, navigating and measuring power the whole time, ran for 27 hours without being charged and ended with 24% battery left. So there are some settings on here that you can set so that it does last that long, but I'm so psyched to be able to have a device now that I don't have to charge for an ultra race. And I think that is probably about everything that is how my bike was set up. I talked about a couple changes with like carbon Aerobars and Ergon SF seat post. And then I think that I'd be psyched to try the Industry 9 Solix XL wheels because they're more dished and more aero, which aero makes a difference in Unbound. So yeah, if you have any questions about my setup or want any advice for your own setup for a similar type outing, drop those in the comments.